I thought I was walking in on a surprise from my wife, until I saw the man behind the curtain. What happened next changed everything I thought I knew about love, trust, and myself. I used to think I was living the dream. Her name's Rachel, and to me she was everything I'd ever hoped for in a partner. She was stunning, self-assured, the kind of woman who could walk into any room and instantly have everyone's attention. We met back in college. I was the guy still figuring out what I wanted from life, kind of drifting. But Rachel? She had it all mapped out. Her future was clear, career goals, travel plans, everything in between. That confidence of hers? It drew me in from the very beginning. I admired how certain she was about everything. We've been married for 6 years now. Over time, Rachel's become a bit of a known name around town. She runs a dance studio and has built a reputation that people really respect. She's got this charm about her. She knows how to make people feel seen, like they matter. But there's another side to her too. Rachel could be razor sharp when she needed to be. If someone crossed her, they usually didn't do it twice. She had this deep need to stay in control. If things didn't go her way, you'd hear about it, no question. That was just part of who she was, strong-willed, a bit closed off, and fiercely protective of herself. For the most part, our life felt typical. Busy, sometimes overwhelming, especially with her business growing the way it did. I honestly thought that was a good sign. She'd come home completely wiped, we'd have a quick chat about her day, and I'd do my best to be there for her. But, sometimes you don't realize the gap forming until you're already standing on opposite sides of it. It wasn't like Rachel and I stopped loving each other, or at least I believed we hadn't. But something began to shift. It started small. I caught myself noticing little things. At first, I brushed them off, like how she was always glued to her phone, even during the time we used to carve out just for us. Or how she'd suddenly snap or get defensive over questions she never used to mind. Where she was, who she was with, those kinds of things became touchy subjects. But Rachel had always valued her privacy, so I chalked it up to me overthinking. Except, turns out, I wasn't just imagining it. One of the few traditions we managed to keep going over the years was showering together. It might sound silly, but it was our little ritual. No matter how busy or drained we were, we'd make time for it. Sure, there was intimacy, but more than that, it gave us a quiet moment to reconnect. Just her and me, under the running water, everything else fading into the background. Sometimes we'd talk about our day, other times we'd just stand there in silence, and somehow that felt even more intimate. Rachel liked the water almost boiling hot. Every time I stepped in after her, I'd practically yelp, feeling like I was stepping into lava. She'd always laugh, maybe adjust the temperature a bit, but not by much. She'd joke that I was just being dramatic, and I'd let it slide because seeing her laugh like that, it made it worth it. Those showers felt like the last piece of us that hadn't changed. She'd wash my hair, her fingers gently massaging away the stress of the day. I'd wrap my arms around her from behind, rest my chin on her shoulder, and for a few fleeting minutes, it felt like the world didn't exist beyond that steamy little space. But then, even that started to change. At first, it was so subtle I nearly missed it. Rachel started checking out emotionally, even when she was right in front of me. She wouldn't linger anymore. She'd be in and out so fast it was like she had somewhere more important to be. And our conversations? They started to feel rehearsed, forced, like she was just going through the motions. I didn't confront her. I kept making excuses. Maybe she was just stressed, maybe she needed space. But deep down I could feel it. Something wasn't right. I held on to those shared showers like they were the last thing keeping us tied together. Maybe that's why I didn't see the truth until much later. The thing about routines is they make you feel safe, until suddenly they don't. You get so used to the rhythm that you miss the subtle shifts. Rachel and I still had our shower ritual, but her presence wasn't the same. She was physically there, but mentally, it felt like she was somewhere else entirely. I talked to her about little things, maybe a funny story from work, and she'd respond with a nod or a distracted smile. Sometimes she wouldn't respond at all. That disconnect didn't stay confined to the bathroom. It started spilling into the rest of our life. During dinner, she'd barely look up from her phone. She told me it was work, clients asking about schedules, potential students reaching out. And I believed her. She was always dedicated to her job. She cared about being the best. But every now and then I'd catch this look on her face while texting, a smile that didn't quite fit the story. It didn't look like a just doing work kind of smile. It looked different, like she was somewhere else, emotionally. I tried not to let it eat away at me. Relationships evolve. People change. After being together so long, I knew things wouldn't always feel brand new. But still, I couldn't shake the growing sense that Rachel was keeping something from me. There were evenings when Rachel would come home later than usual from her dance studio. She'd say one of her students needed extra help perfecting a routine, and I believed her. I really did. I wanted to. But there was this quiet voice deep in my mind that started to speak up more often, whispering doubts I tried hard to ignore. And then there were those little oddities. Her phone was always on silent, even when we were together. Or she'd excuse herself to take a call outside, and when she returned, she'd look off. Not upset exactly, more like flustered, like she'd been caught doing something she wasn't supposed to. Still, I kept telling myself not to overthink it. Rachel was under pressure, juggling clients, running a business. It was only natural for her to be stressed, tired, and occasionally distant. I convinced myself it was just life, that we were both overwhelmed and things would level out. But deep down I started to wonder, was something or someone pulling her attention away from us? At the time I didn't know it, but those small cracks, the ones I kept patching over with excuses, were just the beginning. One ordinary Thursday evening stands out in my mind like a bruise that never fully fades. I'd stayed late at my desk trying to wrap up a project, while Rachel had already headed upstairs for her shower. Normally I'd follow her in, it was our quiet ritual, the one thing that still made us feel close. But that night I lingered downstairs, caught in a swirl of thoughts I couldn't quite name. After a while I decided to go join her. Just like always, keep the habit alive. When I stepped into the bathroom, the air was thick with steam, the mirrors fogged up completely. I could hear the water still running and Rachel's soft humming echoing off the tiled walls. I smiled, thinking I'd quietly slip in beside her. But the moment I pulled the shower curtain back, everything stopped. Rachel was standing there, water cascading over her, phone raised at an angle, snapping a picture of herself, completely unclothed. And it wasn't just the fact that she was taking the photo. It was the look on her face, focused, almost posed, like this wasn't a spontaneous thing. Rachel never did things like that. She didn't even hear me at first. When she finally noticed, she whipped around and screamed, her phone slipping from her hands and splashing into the water below. Her face went pale, then red, panic flooding her features. "What the heck, Jason?" she yelled, scrambling for a towel, trying to cover herself and get out of the shower all at once. It was like she couldn't get away from me fast enough. I froze, completely thrown. "Rachel, I wasn't trying to sneak up on you. You ruined the surprise," she snapped, her voice trembling as she wrapped herself tightly in the towel. I was trying to send you something. A surprise, all right? I thought I'd be playful. You know, text you a flirty photo, ask you to come join me." She looked everywhere but at me, her arms crossed tightly as she stood there dripping and defensive. I stood there, still trying to process it. "You were sending it to me?" I asked, not quite believing the words as they left my mouth. "Yes, Jason. To you," she said, annoyed now. "I thought I'd try something different. Keep things fun. But never mind, you ruined it." She shook her head and brushed past me, stepping out of the room without waiting for a response. I stood there alone, the water still running behind me, trying to slow my thoughts. Maybe she was telling the truth. Maybe I just walked in at the worst possible time. Couples send each other those kinds of things, don't they? I told myself not to make something out of nothing. So I smiled, tried to let it go. "All right," I said, trying to lighten the mood. "Sorry for ruining the surprise. I guess I was just a little too eager." She gave me a faint smile, barely convincing, and nodded. "It's fine. Just give me a sec, okay?" I stepped back, closed the door behind me, but the air around me felt heavier than steam. Her reaction, the fear in her eyes, the way she couldn't get out fast enough, it kept replaying in my head. Like something inside me knew what my heart didn't want to admit. The next morning, Rachel acted like nothing had happened. She gave me a kiss, told me she had a packed day ahead, and headed off to the studio. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was still off. She was trying too hard to seem normal, like someone putting on a show for a crowd that was already starting to leave. I tried diving into work, but that cloud from last night never lifted. Eventually, I grabbed my laptop, thinking I'd distract myself with emails. When I opened it, a draft window popped up automatically, something Rachel must have been working on earlier. The subject line was empty. No address in the to field. Just a single message body staring back at me. And right there, embedded in the message, was the photo. The exact same one I'd seen her take in the shower. At first, I just sat there blinking, trying to rationalize. Maybe she really had been planning to send it to me. Maybe this was the message and she hadn't hit send yet. But then again, there was no greeting. No text. No trace that it was ever meant for me. And that smile on her face in the picture, it didn't feel like it was for me. It felt posed, curated. Meant for someone else. My heart dropped. Every little thing I'd been brushing off, the late nights, the whispered calls, the silence around her phone, all came rushing back like a tidal wave. And now this. A draft message with no recipient, no context, and a photo I never asked for. I shut the laptop. My hands were cold, my chest tight. I didn't want to believe what my instincts were telling me. But that whisper in my gut had turned into something louder. What if that picture wasn't for me at all? And worse, what if I'd already known that deep down? I tried to believe her. I really did. I wanted so badly to trust that there wasn't anything going on, that everything was just a misunderstanding. But for the first time in our marriage, that uneasy feeling in my chest wouldn't go away. It sat there like a weight I couldn't ignore. At work the next day, I kept replaying the night before in my head, trying to convince myself it wasn't what it looked like. Maybe Rachel really was just trying to do something sweet and spontaneous, and I'd accidentally ruined it. That had to be it, right? But then around 2 in the afternoon I got an email from her. Just a simple message. Hey love, I've been thinking about last night. Sorry if I seemed a little off. How about you meet me in the shower at 4 today? I promise I'll make it up to you. I'll be waiting, winky face. It had that playful tone she used to use when we were younger, back when we'd send silly or flirty notes to each other just for fun. But something about it didn't sit right with me. She knew I worked until 6. We hadn't made any plans. Why would she ask me to come home at a time when I obviously couldn't? Still, curiosity, or maybe it was that gnawing sense of dread, got the better of me. I told my supervisor I needed to step away for something personal, grabbed my things and headed home early. As I pulled into the driveway, I noticed Rachel's car already parked out front. My hands were sweating on the steering wheel, but I couldn't figure out why. Maybe I was just nervous, I told myself. Maybe she really was trying to do something special, something to patch the growing silence between us. I unlocked the front door quietly, stepping inside like I didn't want to be heard. The house was quiet except for the soft sound of water running upstairs. The shower. My heart started racing. I left my keys on the table, climbed the stairs slowly, peeling off my jacket and shirt as I went, trying to calm my nerves. This was supposed to be a good thing, I kept telling myself. A gesture of love. A return to something we'd lost. But as I reached the bathroom door, I stopped. Steam rolled out from underneath, thick and warm, and yet the pit in my stomach turned cold. I couldn't explain it, just a gut feeling that something wasn't right. I opened the door slowly, the hinges creaking slightly. The bathroom was filled with mist, the mirror completely fogged. And there, just beyond the haze, under the stream of hot water, was Rachel. But she wasn't alone. There was a man with her, taller than me, arms wrapped around her waist, their bodies pressed together like they were in their own world. They didn't see me. Not at first. They were too caught up in the moment. Time stopped. I couldn't move. Couldn't breathe. My brain struggled to catch up with what my eyes were seeing. The woman I loved more than anything in the world was holding someone else like I didn't even exist. The bathroom door creaked open wider and Rachel's eyes met mine. Her face twisted in panic, pure shock. She screamed, shoving him away like that could somehow undo what had just happened, like she could erase me standing there, watching everything fall apart. Rachel? I barely got the word out. My throat felt tight, my heart pounding so loud it hurt. Jason, she stammered, grabbing a towel, wrapping it around herself like that would shield her from the truth. The man didn't say a word. He grabbed his clothes, kept his head down, and slipped past me like a ghost trying not to be seen. I didn't stop him. I couldn't. I was frozen. The steam, the sound of the water hitting the tile, the smell of shampoo, it was all too real, too vivid. And all I could think about was how this was the exact place where Rachel and I used to feel closest. And now it was where I lost her. She didn't even try to explain. Not really. What could she say? You always hear that when your heart breaks, time slows down. But for me, in that moment, it was the opposite. Everything happened so fast, so absurdly fast that it didn't feel real. And then, I laughed. I don't know why. It wasn't because I found any of it funny. But something about the whole thing, the scene, the timing, the absolute absurdity of it all, pushed me past the point of anger or sadness. I just laughed. There was Rachel, wrapped in a towel far too small to hide the truth, staring at me like she didn't know what to say. And the guy. He'd looked like a cartoon villain caught sneaking out the back door, one sock half on, fumbling with his belt like a bad actor in a bad scene. And me? I just stood there, drenched in betrayal but laughing, not because I was okay but because I didn't know what else to do. I laughed because if I didn't, I might have broken completely. Rachel finally muttered something like, Jason, I can explain, but the way she said it, even she knew how ridiculous that sounded. There was no explanation in the world that could undo what I'd just seen. And in that moment, the worst part wasn't even the cheating. It was the realization that she wasn't even surprised she got caught. Like she'd known it could happen, and had already made peace with it long before I ever walked through that door. The guy never said a word. Not one. He just darted past me, shirt clinging to one arm, one shoe clutched in his hand, his soaked hair dripping down his face. He kept his head down like he was trying to disappear. I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. I turned back toward Rachel, still clutching that flimsy towel like it could somehow shield her from what just happened. I let out a half laugh, the sound more from disbelief than amusement. "You've got to be kidding me," I muttered, shaking my head. This is something out of a cheap soap opera, Ratch." Her face flushed deep red, embarrassment, guilt, maybe both. She opened her mouth like she wanted to explain, to say something that might make it all make sense. I didn't plan," she started. I held up a hand. "Don't. Seriously. There's nothing you could say right now that would make this feel less insane." My smile was empty, the kind someone wears when they've already given up trying to understand. "This is wild. I feel like I should be laughing and crying, but all I can do is stand here." And that was the truth. I wasn't even sure what emotion fit the moment. It hurt, of course it did, but the absurdity of it all was so overwhelming that my mind couldn't land on just pain. It was heartbreak dressed in ridiculousness. Still chuckling under my breath, I picked up my clothes from the floor and walked out, leaving Rachel in the bathroom, dripping, speechless, and staring after me like she didn't know what just happened either. I sank into the couch downstairs, still in a fog. The sound of the shower still running above me felt like background noise in some bad dream. What had just happened was so surreal, so unlike anything I ever imagined I'd experience, that my brain just sort of stalled. She cheated. In our house. In our shower. The place that used to be our haven, our private corner of closeness, had just been turned into something I'd never be able to see the same way again. Eventually Rachel came downstairs. She was dressed now, but she looked like a shadow of the woman I'd known. Pale, distant, silent. She hovered for a moment, like she was waiting for permission to speak. I didn't even look at her. "Jason," she finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm sorry." "Don't," I said, cutting her off without turning my head. "I'm not ready to hear anything." She shifted from one foot to the other, arms crossed like she was trying to hold herself together. That confidence she always wore so boldly? It was gone. What stood in front of me wasn't the Rachel I knew, it was someone else entirely. Small. Lost. "What do you want me to say?" she asked quietly, eyes fixed on the floor. "I don't know, Rachel," I replied, finally looking up at her. "I honestly have no idea. What do people even say after something like this?" I laughed again, but it wasn't humor anymore. It was bitterness. I walked in on my wife, with someone else, in the place we used to share together, and all I can think is how absurd it all feels. She didn't respond. Just stood there watching me, waiting for the explosion, the tears, the fury. But none of that came. I felt too numb for all that. I got up slowly, standing just a few feet from her. "I need space. I need to get out of here before I do or say something I can't take back." Rachel nodded, small and defeated, as I grabbed my keys. She didn't try to stop me. I drove around aimlessly, circling familiar streets without even noticing where I was going. It was like my body was on autopilot while my mind was stuck in that bathroom, stuck on that moment when everything shattered. The absurdity of it all had faded, and the sting of betrayal was settling in deep. Eventually, I pulled into the parking lot of a small diner, the kind of quiet place people go when they need to breathe. I figured I'd sit down, have a coffee, try to clear my head. But before I could even turn off the engine, my phone buzzed. It was a number I didn't recognize. My stomach tightened. I thought for a second, could it be him? The guy? Was he actually calling me? I picked up, unsure of what I'd say. "Hello." I answered, cautious. "Jason." The voice was female. "Yeah, this is Jason." "Who's this?" There was a pause, followed by a shaky exhale. "My name's Claire. I'm not sure how to say this, but I think my husband is having an affair with your wife." I sat in silence, the phone suddenly heavy in my hand. "I'm sorry, what?" "I know it sounds crazy," she said quickly. "I've suspected something for a while, but I didn't know who it was with. Not until today." He left his phone out and unlocked, and I saw messages. Photos. Rachel's name. "I'm sorry to be the one to tell you this." The silence between us stretched. I didn't know what to say. My mouth opened, but no words came out. Because deep down I already knew. Claire's call didn't bring clarity. It brought confirmation. And hearing it from someone else, a stranger who was hurting just like I was, somehow made it all feel even more real. I felt the color drain from my face. Of all the things I expected after that insane day, this wasn't it. So, your husband was the guy I walked in on today? I asked, still trying to piece together the absurd reality of it all. Yes, she whispered. Her voice was barely there. I'm so sorry. I wasn't sure how else to reach out, but your name came up in one of their messages. I found your number. There was a pause, followed by a long, shaky breath. I thought you deserved to know. I just stared ahead, watching cars pass by, people living normal lives while mine had just taken a nosedive into some twisted soap opera. I was sitting in a parking lot, talking to the wife of the man who had just been in my shower with my wife. Thanks for telling me, I finally said, my voice rough, distant. I don't really know what happens next. Claire let out a soft sigh. Neither do I, Jason. But maybe we can figure that out. Together. We ended the call, but something strange happened after that. We didn't just stop talking. If anything, the pain opened the door to something neither of us expected. We started texting, talking, at first just about what we were going through. Two strangers bound by betrayal. But then, it shifted. It started with a joke. One of us, maybe her, maybe me, made some darkly sarcastic comment about how poetic it would be if we gave our spouses a taste of their own medicine. Revenge, not out of hate but just out of raw, aching hurt. Something ridiculous to laugh about because laughter was the only thing keeping us from falling apart. But the idea stuck. Claire told Ryan she was heading out that evening, meeting a friend for drinks. It was normal enough and he didn't question it. He'd done this before, used these nights to sneak around. This time he'd invited Rachel over, thinking they'd have the house to themselves. Meanwhile, I was already on my way to Claire's place, caught up in this absurd idea of pretending to cheat to prove a point. To turn the tables. That was the plan, a staged scene, something that would mirror the betrayal. But when I stepped inside, the mood was different. We were both nervous, laughing too much, pacing the floor. Claire poured wine. We talked about the insanity of what we were doing. Two betrayed people trying to make sense of their lives through something that sounded more like a prank than therapy. But somewhere between the laughter and the hurt, things changed. The weight of betrayal hung heavy between us, and all that pain, it turned into something else. We weren't pretending anymore. I leaned in. She didn't pull away. The kiss was soft at first, hesitant, but it deepened quickly. It was like we both needed it, not as revenge but as a way to feel something real again. The clothes came off. The lines blurred. And what started as a plan turned into something raw and desperate and human. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about release. And then the front door opened. Rachel and Ryan stood there, frozen. Their eyes locked on us, tangled together in Claire's bed, the very picture of what they had done to us. The shock on Rachel's face was unforgettable. Her jaw dropped, her entire body stiffened like someone had poured ice water down her back. And Ryan? He looked like the wind had been knocked out of him. Claire and I sat up, the sheets pulled to our chests, our breathing still heavy. For a moment, no one said anything. It was just silence. Rachel's wide eyes searched mine, like she couldn't understand what she was seeing. Ryan looked like someone had punched a hole in his carefully crafted illusion. And the irony? None of this was even supposed to happen. We were going to fake it. Just pretend. But there we were, caught in a scene more twisted than anything we could have scripted. After that night, everything changed. What began as a stunt for justice turned into a breaking point I didn't realize I needed. There was no saving what Rachel and I had. That truth hit me harder than the betrayal itself. So the next morning, I did what needed to be done. I filed for divorce. I don't think Rachel saw it coming. Not so soon. I think she assumed we'd spiral into weeks of arguing, crying, rehashing everything until we both were numb. But I was already past that. I couldn't stay in that limbo any longer. I had to let go, for my own sanity. When I handed her the papers, the look on her face was almost identical to the one she'd worn when she saw me with Claire. Jason, what is this? She asked, her voice thin, desperate. It's the end, Rachel, I replied, steady but calm. I'm done. We're done. She blinked rapidly, still holding the papers like they were a foreign object. But we haven't even talked. Don't you think we should at least try to fix this? There's nothing left to fix, I said, shaking my head. You made your choice, and I made mine. I'm not trying to punish you. I just want to move forward. Her posture crumpled a bit, and for the first time she didn't seem strong or composed, she just looked lost. We've been together so long. Doesn't any of that matter? She asked, her voice cracking. You were with Claire too. Doesn't that make us even? No, I said quietly. Because it was never about being even. It's about trust. And what we had, it's gone. You broke it. I broke it. And I don't want to keep pretending like it can be put back together. She didn't say anything after that. Just stood there, frozen, like someone who realized too late that they'd pushed too far. And for the first time in what felt like forever, I walked away feeling like I was finally making the right choice, not out of spite, not out of anger, but out of clarity. As Rachel stood there, clutching the divorce papers, her hands visibly shaking, she whispered, "I never thought it would end like this." And honestly, neither did I. After filing, I expected to spend the next several months buried in heartache, picking through the ruins of what used to be my life, trying to figure out who I was without her. But life, funny enough, had a different plan. Claire and I kept talking. At first, it was just about everything we'd gone through, how we'd both been blindsided, betrayed, pulled into something we never asked for. It felt like therapy in a way, two people who actually understood what it was like to have their world fall apart overnight. But somewhere along the way the conversation started to shift. It wasn't just about Rachel and Ryan anymore. We talked about work, our families, the music we liked. Dumb stuff too, TV shows, weird food combos we swore were good. And it was easy. Natural. Before I knew it, those late-night calls turned into walks in the park, coffee meetups, weekend hikes. Not as two people looking to escape pain, but as two people slowly, cautiously stepping into something new. Claire, she's something else. I found myself wondering more than once how Ryan could have been so careless. She's warm, grounded, and has this way of looking at you that makes you feel like you matter, really matter. She listens without judging, laughs with her whole heart, and talks like she's not afraid of silence. Being around her felt like finding something I hadn't even realized I'd lost. One evening, after a long hike in the foothills outside town, we ended up sitting on her porch, sipping wine, watching the sky melt into orange and purple. She turned to me with this calm, thoughtful smile and said, "I think we were supposed to meet this way. I hate how it happened, but I think it led us somewhere better." I didn't say anything at first, just looked at her. Because she was right. I never thought I'd fall for someone again so soon, not after what I'd just gone through. But with Claire it didn't feel rushed. It felt like healing. It felt real. She brought out the best in me. Made me feel seen again, not as the guy who got cheated on, not as some sad story, but as someone worth knowing, worth loving. We built something out of the rubble, something steady and strong. And while Claire and I grew closer, Rachel and Ryan, well, they fell apart. Ryan, it turned out, had never planned to lose his marriage. Claire was the one thing in his life he thought he could count on. Megan? She was a distraction. A fling. He never thought it would cost him everything. When Claire left him, he crumbled. He begged her to come back. Flowers, texts, voicemails, the works. But it was too late. Claire had moved on and so had I. As for Rachel, I think she thought I'd cave. That eventually I'd sit down with her, have the what went wrong talk, cry it out, maybe even try to rebuild. But the truth is, I didn't want to rebuild something that had been hollowed out by lies. And when Ryan chose to chase his wife instead of her, she found herself standing alone, in the wreckage she helped create. She expected a storybook ending. What she got was silence. But for Claire and me that wasn't the end, it was the beginning. We moved in together about 3 months after everything. And it's been real. Honest. Every morning I wake up next to her, I feel thankful, not just for what we have, but for the road that brought us here, no matter how rough it was. Funny how life works. What started as one of the worst days of my life, walking in on my wife with another man, somehow led me here. To this. To peace. To someone who genuinely sees me, respects me, loves me. It wasn't the ending I thought I'd get. But looking back now, it's exactly the one I needed. And maybe that's the strangest part of it all. Sometimes the worst things bring out the best chapters. Ours is just getting started. And I can honestly say, I'm happy again.